We depend on others for our security choices. We depend on donors for our health and educational systems. We supply the world's critical minerals but capture almost none of its value. This isn't sovereignty, it's a trap. The COVID experience was a wake-up call. Africa was the last continent to begin receiving vaccines amid a global pandemic. But for the immunological profile and resilience of our African population, many millions would have died in that pandemic.
The speech you have just watched is from Ghana's President John Dramani Mahama, who has delivered a powerful and fearless address at Davos, right here at the World Economic Forum currently underway. This bold African leader, speaking without fear or favour, has sent shockwaves across the globe by confronting the deep-seated injustices that our beloved continent continues to endure, from historical exploitation to ongoing inequities in the global order. Brothers and sisters across Africa and the diaspora, let us rise and listen attentively to this historic speech.
Africa has thrived on handouts and humanitarian assistance from the developed world. While no specific name has yet been coined for the new global system that will emerge, Africa intends to be at the table in determining what that new global order will look like. Africa must pull itself up by its own bootstraps. Global humanitarian assistance is shrinking, and many developed countries, including Europe, are compelled to cut overseas development assistance and increase defense spending by the new reality of an unpredictable ally across the Atlantic. The COVID experience was a wake-up call. Africa was the last continent to begin receiving vaccines amid a global pandemic. But for the immunological profile and resilience of our African population, many millions would have died in that pandemic. And that is why I'm grateful, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, that you made time to be a part of this afternoon's Davos convening of the Accra Reset Initiative on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum. Just last September at the UN General Assembly, I introduced the Accra Reset Initiative, not as another declaration, not as a wish list, but as a practical answer to a question millions of young Africans are asking: what should Africa's response be in a changing global order? Today in Ghana, we're answering that question. We're resetting our country. We're cutting waste, we're restoring hope, and we're building systems that work. In my first year of being back in office, we've shown that democracy works, and that change is possible when leadership is focused and accountable to the people. From a debt-distressed, crisis-ridden economy, we've achieved an impressive turnaround with a stable macroeconomy characterized by single-digit inflation, a strengthened currency, and increased business confidence. But here's what keeps me up at night. Ghana's success alone is not enough. However admirable Ghana's turnaround story is, we cannot be a jewel in the dirt. We must work together as Africa. We must knit together the patchwork of success stories. And that is why we're here in Davos today, to take what's working across many countries in Africa and the global south and scale it up across other countries, to move from resetting one country to resetting the entire development model for the global south. And let me be direct about what we're up against. Too many of our countries are caught in what I call the triple dependency. We depend on others for our security choices. We depend on donors for our health and educational systems. We supply the world's critical minerals but capture almost none of its value. This isn't sovereignty, it's a trap. And it's getting worse. In my quiet moments, as I try to find solutions, here's what I've learned. Crisis creates clarity. The clarity is this, that we must build our own capacity to act. There's precedent for what I'm proposing. 20 years ago, UN Secretary General Kofi Annan and several courageous world leaders, including President Obasanjo here, made a simple, powerful case. HIV/AIDS was ravaging millions in Africa and a global response was required. This courage created the architecture of the Global Fund, which saved millions of lives in Africa and across the world. That fight succeeded because leaders decided to act together with urgency and without excuse. Today, I'm not so sure. The US is gutting funding to the United Nations system and other global organizations that have saved millions of lives. And we face an unpredictable world. And this is why Africa must be responsible for its destiny. Today, we face a different pandemic, the pandemic of unfulfilled potential. Millions of young people have no jobs, health systems that collapse at the first crisis, economies that extract our resources but build nothing long-lasting. If we could mobilize the world to fight a disease, why can't we mobilize to fight poverty, to fight dependency, to fight the systems that keep brilliant young Africans locked out of the future? In Ghana, we're proving something important, that execution beats excuses. We're cutting government spending and have reduced the size of government to a record low of 58 ministers, including deputy ministers and regional ministers. We're digitizing services to end corruption. We're training young people for the jobs of tomorrow. We have renegotiated our debt so we can invest in our people and not just service loans. This is a resetting Ghana agenda, and it's working because we stopped talking about the transformation and we started building that transformation. Now imagine this same approach across Africa and the entire global south. The multilateral order and rules-based system may be under threat, but we can forge a new coalition of the willing based on a shared vision and mutual respect for each other. What if we pooled our negotiating power on critical minerals so we capture value and not just extract raw ore? What if we exercise more sovereignty over our natural resources to create prosperity for our own people? What if we build regional manufacturing hubs that create millions of jobs for our young people? What if we produce our own vaccines and our own medicines with our own technology? This is the Accra Reset vision. It's not a talk shop. It's not a declaration. It's a practical blueprint for how countries can work together to build real sovereignty, the kind that you can measure in jobs created, in children at school, children vaccinated, and young people thriving. My fellow leaders, let me speak plainly. In this fast-changing world, we're entering an era where countries must compete, innovate, and build or be left behind. Our young people are watching, they're brilliant, they're hungry, and they're running out of patience. So here's what we must focus on. First, we must invest in skills, not just education, but skills that match real jobs in the real economy. Digital skills, green energy skills, manufacturing skills. We need a generation of young Africans who can build and not just consume. Second, we must build together. No African country can industrialize alone by itself. We must create regional prosperity platforms, manufacturing zones, energy grids, and digital infrastructure that gives our businesses scale and our workers opportunity. Third, we must negotiate as one. When we bargain separately, we're weak. When we negotiate together on minerals, trade, and climate finance, we can be formidable. Unity should not be just a slogan, it must be our strategy. Fourth, we must produce at home, from vaccines to semiconductors to solar panels. If we don't make it, we'll always be dependent on someone who does. Industrial policy isn't old-fashioned, it is what will make us survive. And fifth, and most importantly, we must hold ourselves accountable to our people. We cannot ask the world to invest in us if we tolerate corruption, waste, and systems that don't work. Reset means reform, and reform means results. And so the Davos commitment. Friends, we didn't come here to ask for charity. We came to propose a global partnership of the willing, based on a shared vision and mutual respect for each other. The Accra Reset is building the architecture for a new kind of cooperation, one where Global South countries don't just receive programs but co-design them with our partners in the Global North, where we don't just attract investment but shape it around what are our priorities. We want to create prosperity fears across regional platforms where countries coordinate on investments, infrastructure, and jobs. President Obasanjo often reminds me that leadership is about legacy. And he asks me, what will you leave behind? My answer is simple. We want to leave a continent where young people don't risk their lives crossing the Mediterranean because they will have opportunities at home. We want to leave systems that work, industries that thrive, and nations that stand tall. And in this, Ghana cannot do it alone. Africa can't do it alone. There's a call to every leader in this room. If you believe in a world where prosperity is shared, not just based on narrow interests, then join us. If you believe the Global South deserves partnership and not pity, join us. If you believe the next chapter of human progress is going to be written in Accra, Nairobi, Kigali, Abuja, and Cairo, then join us. The Accra Reset is not seeking permission, we're building momentum. From New York last September to this room in Davos and to the African Union in Addis Ababa next month, and soon at the Oslo Dialogues, we shall continue to build these partnerships. And so the question is not whether the world needs this, the question is whether we have the courage to build it. I thank you.
Now, brothers and sisters, after listening to this speech from John Mahama, the President of Ghana, let us now listen to this bold speech from the former President of Nigeria, Obasanjo.
And when I speak today, I speak as a member of the Guardian Circle of the Accra Reset. We have come to Davos to do what must be done in a moment like this. And the moment like this have been said by the panel that came when I first came in, that I listened to, by the panel of the former Vice President of Nigeria and Dr. Tedro, the DG of WHO, by the Vice President of Nigeria, and to name reality clearly, to define a practical direction, and to call serious people to serious work of new resource architecture, including investment for sustainable and sustained development and growth. That is what Accra Reset is all about. All-inclusive development. We are living through a new age of disruption, uncertainty, and unpredictability. The world is reorganizing. Borders matters again. At one time, say, borders are just line of demarcation, but they do not become anything to restrict movement. They are becoming restriction of movement. Supply chains are being redrawn. Security and economics are fused. And at the same time, the old development architecture is struggling, wobbling, and unreliable. Aid systems are under fiscal stress and are dwindling, if not disappearing. Institutions are pulled by competition and mandates. Trust is weakening. Coordination is harder. In such moments, countries that are not organized for negotiation and execution do not merely fall behind. They become bargaining chips and at best, and footsteps are the worst. That is why the Accra Reset has come to be, to inspire leaders to stop complaining about the system that has changed or is changing, and to build a way through it. Across much of Global South, we see a similar distressing pattern. And as the Prime Minister said during the panel discussion, clarity of policies that we don't often see. Vulnerability to the geopolitics of others. Dependence on financing that comes with fragmentation, volatility, and weak domestic accountability. Marginalization from value and technology, even when the inputs come from our soil and the labor comes from our people. My brother, President John Mahama, has called it a triple dependency. I agree. And it produces a dangerous habit. It trains nations to negotiate from fear, to plan from scarcity, and to implement under permanent interruption, and now with disruption added. So let us be clear. Sovereignty is not a flag that we have gone to come here and wave about. Sovereignty is discipline. It is the ability to make choices and carry them through. It is the ability to negotiate firmly, coordinate regionally, mobilize capital, incentivize resources, and implement at scale that leads to sustainable development and growth. If you cannot execute, you cannot be sovereign. If you cannot coordinate, you will be divided. If you cannot negotiate, you will be priced, packaged, and positioned by others. No one cares that we are tired of this. Everyone waits to see if we will lift up and get going. No bird builds a nest with the full foliage. Every wise bird starts with twigs and then knits them. We are announcing clear test beds and exemplary programs and projects, starting turbines to give us thrust and lift. For example, we set health as a clear test of sovereignty. So we intend to embed it in the North-South dialogue to negotiate with our friends and development partners in the North about certain critical reforms as well as concrete projects to boost access to health facilities and technology. We are also talking about critical minerals, sovereign artificial intelligence models that can be packaged in public-private partnerships for projects that mean more to us in our parts of the world than they do to global technology giants. To these must be added mobilization of resources internally. And during the panel discussion, I think this was very clearly brought about. And also incentivize resources from outside. We are talking about grooming, empowering, and badging a new cadre of sovereign strategists and negotiators to enter these dialogues and others on our behalf, whilst ensuring that their blades remain sharp through communities of practice and peer learning. And we, asking our friends in Singapore, India, Brazil, Indonesia, South Korea, to name just a few, to join us in policy exchanges to take these undertakings forward collectively, grandly, hugely, and passionately. Today, President John Mahama of Ghana will set out the programmatic strategy of the Accra Reset. He will also launch the search for members of our distinguished college that will flesh out these various proposals being presented here, whilst laying out the motivation and roadmap for the inaugural high-level panel and its linkage to the North-South dialogue process. Let me end with a simple statement. The future will not be given to the unprepared. It will be negotiated. It will be built. And it will belong to those who prepare, unite, and organize for it. Thank you.